Letter to the Unknown Teacher. William Ospina. Colombian writer, novelist, and critic born in the Herveo municipality of the Tolima department. Letter to the Unknown Teacher. Governments often entrust warriors with the mission of saving their peoples. Save the country, they say to a man on horseback who has a spear in his hand, and who has a heroic duty to disrupt fierce groups of armed enemies. Today, the situation in Colombia is different. It is the teacher who has the duty and the possibility to save society. But who is the teacher? Not necessarily someone who has that profession and who is paid to teach. I believe that in all of us there must be a teacher, just as in all there must be a student. There is so much to learn that no one can afford to be only the one who teaches, and no one can afford to be only the one who learns. We are in difficult times, we are in dark times, so we cannot afford to think that there are only specialized places called schools where people teach and learn. The whole country is the school, the whole world is the school, and a good teacher must also help us learn the lessons that rivers give us when they overflow, the forests when they are cut down, the industry when it is not aware of its responsibilities, politicians when instead of fulfilling their noble mission of managing public resources for the common benefit, they abandon themselves to corruption and selfishness. All human beings are continually learning. The real thing is not that we do not learn, but that we often learn the wrong things. Because nothing is learned as much as by example, and any person in the modern world is continually exposed to eloquent and terrible examples. Television is not exactly a chair of good manners, politics is not always a lesson in honesty, advertising is not a lesson in modesty and austerity, the world economy is by no means a lesson in generosity, the way how the world is governed is of course not an admirable lesson in logic. And when the students, when answering the evaluation tests of their understanding processes, show that they do not know how to handle the basic principles of logic, that they cannot reason, that they do not know how to deduce, that they do not understand well the meaning of the texts, that they fail to argue clearly and with method, often what they are showing us is that they live in a world that does not teach logic, that does not show good sense, that does not transmit mental order, that does not teach understanding with others. Let us not make the mistake of thinking that all this is due exclusively to the fact that teachers are failing, that pedagogical methods are failing, that the school is failing. What happens is that the school is just a part of the educational system, and sometimes we unload on it all the blame for the evils and all the responsibility for the solutions. That is why I repeat that education has the duty to correct the evils of society and to save it in times of so much confusion and anguish, but I hasten to clarify that education has to commit the entire community and not just the school and their teachers. The school, however, has possibilities to help change that other sectors do not have. It welcomes people at an early age, when they are more receptive, more curious, more lively, and more able to trust their guide. You have all the time to experiment with learning methods appealing to enthusiasm, solidarity, healthy emulation, cooperation, playability, extraordinary memory, and the high sense of honor and personal pride that students normally have. Young people when they are not treated in an offensive or despotic way. Every child is full of questions, and education would be easier if it did not believe it was full of answers, if it learned that, as Novalis said, every enigma is food, something that moves us to seek, that should move us to seek our entire life, that the worst thing that can happen to a true question is to be satisfied with the first answer you find. Education should not consist so much in filling us with certainties as in guiding and feeding our searches. If someone is interested, for example, in the topic of health and disease, it would be worth asking why almost all medicines come from plants, what an almost miraculous mystery there is in those grooves and in those seeds. And it is convenient for all of us to ask ourselves when gastronomy and medicine separated. I have no doubt that in their origins gastronomy and medicine should be the same thing, as I think they will have to be again. Preventive medicine is food, and a good part of curative medicine should be too. The modern world seems to show us that the more separated the two, the more profitable they are, and the more harmful. If what we eat hurts us, the pharmaceutical industry earns more. All this has to do with the idea that I raised before, that the whole world is in a way the school, and that education is, or should be, everywhere. I am going to give another example that has to do with food. A species as ancient and skilled as the human species must have learned long ago that reliable food is 50 centuries for sure. I mean, foods that we have put to the test for 5,000 years already give us all the guarantees that they are healthy, that they are useful. Those seeds that we have domesticated over the millennia, corn, wheat, barley, rye, that milk, those cheeses, those fruits, those vegetables, and those nuts. It must be said that those drinks, too, the juices, the beers, the wines. But in recent times, scientific experimentation has begun to modify these long-won seeds. Genetics is in a position to incorporate genes from one species to another, to strengthen or alter some of their characteristics, and all of this is fine. It is very human to investigate and experiment. But of course, what a sensible and prudent species cannot do is immediately incorporate these results into the common diet, when there are decades, if not centuries, to know what the consequences of these modifications will be. It is convenient to be alert to the follies of the industry, sometimes capable of proposing that a genetically manipulated product be abruptly incorporated into the human diet, for the mere sake of profitability, pretending that sufficient tests have been done, without yet knowing what effect they will cause those changes on the genetic information of the generations. Another quasi-divine characteristic of nature is the lavishness of the seeds. Since always in the world each species wastes its seeds, the fertile pollen flies in the wind, the human and animal seed, the reproduction mechanisms, are of an overwhelming abundance, and this proves that the main tendency of life is the will to permanence, the design of perpetuation, and that the main insurance of the species is generosity, the abundance of resources to multiply what Rubén Darío called, the universal, omnipotent, fertilization. Now technology and industry have begun to make curious modifications, to invent, for example, seedless fruits, in order to become owners of patents and to force growers to have to buy seeds again, always and always. They claim that having done an innovation on the goods of the earth assures them the property over them, the privatization of their gifts. I have never seen anything that goes against the lavishness of life in a more alarming way. When did nature charge us for its seeds? When did you deprive us of the right to grow oranges and vineyards? I do not usually speak of sins, but it is difficult for me to conceive of a more evident sin than that of replacing the infinite generosity of nature with the pettiness of the market. Education is raising the debate on issues like these, and in that sense, what has to be learned here is the same as what has to be learned all over the planet. The planet is the school. There are, however, other fields where education is concerned with local issues. I have heard it said that when a Chinese visits another country, he assumes the attitude that it is not a person who is visiting him but that it is China itself who comes. I don't know if that will be true, but it seems highly recommended to me. Each one of us should be a kind of conscious synthesis of the land to which we belong. This means knowing the country, its geography, its nature, its history, its customs, being a spokesperson for a community, a representative of a tradition and a unique way of being in the world. And of course, in these times, it is convenient for each human being to be the world in some way, representing humanity, its memories and its values, its resources and its hopes, and education should help us to have that high awareness of ourselves, themselves and the world to which we belong. The main characteristic of the human being, what differentiates it from all other creatures, is its ability to learn. Some animals are capable of training, of assimilating behaviors, but most have instinctive information incorporated that only allows them to survive and repeat a way of being in the world. The bee makes honey and it will never occur to it to make anything else. The innumerable ant knows how to cut the leaves and feed them to the fungus that feeds its anthill. This feline knows how to hunt antelope and this hippopotamus knows how to cool off in the water. This spider knows how to weave its exquisite mesh and this beaver knows how to make dams with logs, but only human beings are capable of learning and innovating. Man is that dangerous creature capable of inventing swords and plowshares, violins and cannons, cathedrals and concentration camps, symphonies and nuclear bombs. I do not know if we are fully aware that our ability to learn is both our main privilege and our main danger. That the resources with which we build our civilization, language, the state, technology, science, thought, discipline, can also serve to build our hell. We are children of nature, but we are different from the rest of nature. We are searching like no other creature, and if the worst can be expected of us, it is also a comfort to know that the best can be expected. Learning is first of all learning the language, because only in the field of language is our ability to interpret the world, understand it and transform it. Language is also, of course, memory, and not only personal memory but the accumulated memory of generations, from the art of preparing food, utensils, clothing, from the ceremonies that teach us to pass from one age to another, to share, to celebrate, to be grateful, even the techniques that allow us to cultivate, inhabit, transform, face the unknown. The adventure of living is a formidable adventure, and the reality is essentially incredible. But how do we learn the language? In all ages the resource was stories and songs. An affectionate voice narrated stories from the cradle. The music of each region brought us in songs the elemental secrets of the world. I am not sure that stories and songs continue to accompany human beings from an early age. Maybe the written letter, the printed letter, can replace them, but I doubt that television screens and the so-called audiovisual methods can introduce us in the same way to the secrets of language, which are not only secrets of meaning but secrets of sound, of rhythm, of affection, of identification. Through those cordial words heard early, we learn to feel part of a community, of a way of being, and that is only given by the company of other human beings. As Juan de la Cruz said, look at the disease of love that is not cured, but with the presence and the figure. But we have entered an age where only what is far away seems understandable. The one who speaks next to us is less important than the one who calls on the phone. The bodies seem to get in the way. Ghosts, signs, mere voices, are more comfortable. There are those who think that education consists mainly of providing us with information. Some take their faith further and think that education should fill us with knowledge. Although it is a mistake to believe that learning is memorization, tests often only test that human ability. It is believed that what is not remembered is not known. But if you remember something, do you really know it? Nietzsche's phrase "we only know what we know how to do" seems exaggerated, but it is interesting and challenging. Formal education sometimes suggests that mathematics, then physics, is a set of formulas to be memorized. But these sciences require much more than memory. They require that we be able to reason, to analyze, to solve problems in many different ways. The evaluative tests of our education reveal to us that we are not learning to reason, or to argue, and not even to understand what we read. And it is believed that we do not have evidence that allows us to evaluate how much we are learning in terms of coexistence, respect for others, incorporation of ethical values, cordiality with nature, belonging to the community. I dare to say, sadly, that those other evaluations of our education do exist. They are crime rates, levels of corruption, rates of domestic violence, the countless processes that accumulate in the courts, the rise of the crime, the tone of comments in public forums. Thanks to a vast process of reflection, we have identified some problems that it is urgent to solve in educational processes. They have to do with thinking, creativity, affectivity, communication, and socialization. Teaching to think for yourself requires respectful recognition of dignity and importance. Who learns from? Science, said Stanislaw Zolta, requires argumentation and demonstration, and something is only shown to those who are our equal. Someone inferior is ordered, someone superior is begged. Only those who are equal to us are argued and shows you. For this reason, the main challenge in the field of thought and argumentation is respect for the dignity of those whom we teach or with whom we dialogue. All authoritarianism forms subject or resentful beings, never free and equal beings. In the field of creativity, the main ally is art. Solving problems in an original and harmonious way requires a feeling of beauty, a sense of rhythm and balance, and an awareness that the processes should be pleasant. To be artistic, education must provide pleasure and enthusiasm. It must have the rigor of perfection and the joy of the game. In the order of effectivity, where feelings are involved, a sense of justice, harmony, and courtesy is necessary. It is essential that the things that are learned are true and beautiful, but it is also necessary that they be good, and this implies a system of evaluations. We also require communication skills, and the instrument in this field is not only language but dialogue. Conversation, which Kant considered the most important of the arts. And finally, the purpose of any educational process is not only to create free, lucid, harmonious, and expressive human beings, but beings with a deep sense of belonging to a community. Extreme competitiveness stimulates selfishness, cooperative exercises stimulate our awareness that we need others, strengthen our sense of community. Perhaps the contents of education, being so important, are secondary. Perhaps what we need most is a philosophy of education, an attitude, a method, and above all a purpose. The purpose of education cannot be to make us successful and profitable. This limits education to the training of workers without grace and without values. It sinks us into the danger of believing that where there is individual success the mission has been fulfilled. It is necessary to see how drug trafficking exposed the madness of an education oriented to profitability and success, demonstrating that these things can be achieved without going through school, and demonstrating above all that wealth separated from a deep sense of dignity and of community only brings fright to individuals and societies. We will never value enough the role of doing in educational processes. It is worth remembering the old Confucius sentence, I heard it and forgot it, I saw it and understood it, I did it and I learned it. So I would like to end these meditations by remembering the importance of three things. 1. Of learning through doing. The second, understanding that education does not educate everyone but everyone, that in order to be a formation that helps to live, it must take into account the questions that arise from each conscience, from each human being. And the third, that on the way to overcoming the purely cerebral, theoretical, and intellectual aspect, it is urgent to learn with the whole body. For all this it is required, without a doubt, that teachers are the most valued of the resources of a society. Are the main responsible for introducing a whole new generation into the universe. How can they have less recognition than warriors? Also the resources destined for education must be the proof that we want to leave the age of barbarism, to enter into the spirit of civilization. End. Letter to the Unknown Teacher. William Ospina.